This is Independent Nation Talk Show. Today is Wednesday, August the 13th, and tonight we have two guests. One, a candidate from the Ward 8, and another, a candidate from Ward 32, both for the upcoming municipal elections. And I asked them kindly to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit briefly about their background and why they get to this race, so to speak. We'll start with Arthur. Arthur, go ahead.
I'm Arthur Smitherman. I'm running in Ward 8 against incumbent Anthony Peruzza. I have a breadth of post-secondary education. I have legal education, and I have dispute resolution training. On top of that, I was born into an entrepreneur-type family where my father was a workaholic. He worked very, very hard to build his company up, and very much learned the service business through him. So I have a breadth of experience. I feel I'm particularly qualified to be a counselor because of my service business, my breadth of post-secondary education, the legal education, but particularly the dispute resolution training. I think that's really going to help me work with my constituents as well as fellow counselors to develop win-win situations.
James?
Yeah, hi there. My name's James Sears. I'm running in Ward 32 against Mary-Margaret McMahon, or as I call her, Marxist Mary. I wasn't going to enter politics right now, but I saw a video clip of Mary-Margaret McMahon becoming extremely agitated and becoming a total basket case. And I didn't know what the clip was. Somebody sent it to me. I looked at the clip. She was having a nervous breakdown, and I said, what is this? I thought maybe there was a bomb threat at City Hall, someone died, you know. It turned out Rob Ford said pussy. And it just completely turned her into a basket case. She wasn't able to function. And I thought, my God, this is just terrible. And I said, who is this person? And then it turned out to be our counselor. And I put my name in to run immediately in January. And I thought, I didn't think I would have a chance at the time. And then neighbors started approaching me saying, you're running against Mary? Thank God. And I thought, well, what's the problem with Mary? And they informed me that she would do what we used to call in the armed forces, D&D, delegate and disappear. People would call her for problems, and she's obsessed with CO2 emissions, bicycle lanes, anything to do with, you know, being an earthy granola chick, but totally useless otherwise. And I decided I'm in it to win it at that time. And I've had a lot of response from the neighbors, and they're totally into it. I know you said your father was a workaholic. My father was an alcoholic, so a little bit different. I came from a very, very abusive background with a father who worked very long hours, a night shift. We didn't have a lot of money as a family. I appreciate money. And now that I am successful, I've decided I don't want the salary of a counselor. Counselors get paid $105,000 a year. I'm foregoing the salary. I don't need it. So I'm going to be working for free. And I've also decided not to accept donations from people. I'm funding the campaign myself because I don't want to owe anyone anything. And when I do get elected, I'm going to work for the people, and I'm going to be their slave for 4 years.
Well, a noble idea. Let's see what's happened at the end. I want to see both of you in council to see whether or not you stick to your guns.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Smitherman, so a lot of respect. He has a good reputation.
As an ex-candidate, provincially and federally, I respect anyone who put his or her name on the ballot. It's a tough time for anyone who wants to put his face and his name in front of the public. Let me start, go back to Arthur and ask him, why politics?
Well,
why city?
Politics are sort of, for me, they're sort of opportunity to mix my blue-collar roots, my post-secondary education, my critical thinking skills, my breadth of post-secondary education with legal training and dispute resolution training to bring an area that's been deprived of resources win-win situations. It's actually quite simple.
So you believe there is a deficiencies in the city hall that you can
Absolutely.
with your skills and your background you can bring
Well,
some changes, positive ones.
well, speaking about painting politics with a broad brush, what tends to happen more often than not is you have people that have been acclimated into a very political correct type genre, their whole persona. It doesn't necessarily transfer into an effective elected official. In Toronto, you can see through statistics that certain resources have been withheld from certain parts of the city, certain classes of people in the city, and this has created poverty. We have structural poverty in the city largely because, not exclusively, but largely because resources have not been distributed equally and fairly. We have a huge systemic discrimination problem in the city of Toronto.
Do you agree with him?
I agree 100%. In the same way that the Marxists took over the Soviet Union, and there was an elite upper class that was eating the caviar and living the high life, and everyone else was poor. The Marxists have taken over Canadian society, and there's a two-class system here. And something's got to be done. There are 8,000 people, roughly, in the city of Toronto on the Sunshine List, which means they make over $100,000 a year. 8,000 people. And with benefits, that's over $1 billion being paid to those 8,000 people. We collect $3.7 billion of property taxes a year. That means 27% of your property tax goes to 8,000 people. Okay? I mean, it's disgusting. And, you know, there's 3,000 police making over $100,000 a year. You know, the reason why the police get paid like a policeman and not a security guard is because they're supposed to risk their lives. And when there's a guy who's mentally disturbed holding a knife, you're supposed to risk getting slashed and not pull your gun and approach him and try to talk him down. Instead, they pull their guns out. And they're getting paid $100,000, some of them, not all of them, but 3,000 are. The police chief, $370,000 a year. They didn't renew his contract, and some bureaucratic moron put a clause in there that if they don't renew his contract, he gets another $370,000 as a goodbye.
The golden parachute.
The golden parachute. Like, what is that? There's 1,400 people in the TTC making over $100,000. If you slash their salaries, we can bring the price of tokens down to $2.50. How can the poor afford to pay $3, even in bulk, $2.70? Poor families can't afford. I came from a poor family. You can't afford to pay that. And 2,200 teachers getting over $100,000 a year for working 9 months. For working, and the education sucks. Not necessarily because of the teachers, but because of the curriculum. And they work 9 months a year. Like, it's am I allowed to swear on the show? It's unfucking believable. I have to say. I can't.
Freedom of a speech.
No, I can't. For the life of me, I don't understand it. And the poor people that get this housing, there's bed bugs, there's other issues in the housing. In, you know, counselors, Mary-Margaret had gone to some of these places, you know, the woman I'm running against, and she feeds them lies. She feeds them lies, saying, "Oh, I'm going to help you," whatever. And she says
it's a barrage of excuses.
Exactly. She shows up at canteen. Yeah.
I was at an ACORN meeting last night, and one of their main objectives is.
For our viewers, what is ACORN?
It's an organization. It's an international organization. I think primarily North America. But it's an advocacy group, and some of their focus is on tenant issues.
And living structure.
Yeah, and the problems we have in Toronto with the TCHC are just phenomenal. We've got all 70,000 people on the waiting list. We've got vacant units
I heard
that
a
are
larger number than that on the waiting list.
It could be. I very well may stand corrected, but we've got all kinds of empty units. Why? They're not habitable. These places they're basically destroyed. They need to be
In
rebuilt.
Toronto, in Canada.
Nobody's taken a brush or a wrench or anything to them in well over 10 years.
He's right. There's no organization there.
Yeah. So we've got this old housing stock. We've got vacant properties, which we don't have the money to keep up with. And we've got 70,000 people minimum on waiting lists. So there's a huge disparity here in the distribution of resources.
Not to
When it
mention
gets,
the homeless.
well, not to mention the homeless, but when it gets to the point where we've got this housing stock that we can't even maintain and people homeless, that's an absolute, it's an abomination. That was the word I used last night, in fact. It is an abomination.
We're a very rich
The resources
I
misappropriated entirely.
want
Sorry to
to
interrupt.
ask both of you, because in the previous shows I had MPPs in the show, I had ex-cabinet federal cabinet ministers on the show, I had again from the conservative liberals and so on. And I always ask, every one of you complain and say there are all of these deficiencies, and yet in the process of in the democratic process or the rule of law, the way that we supposed to have, and all of these measurements are in place. If I park somewhere wrong, immediately I get a ticket and then I have to pay. How come all of these things happened and no supervision? Let's just start with James first. How is possible all of these?
Well, there is supervision. There are directors and people in charge of these various, subgroups of government, but they're not held accountable. There's no accountability. If your salary was geared towards savings, if it's like, okay, you're going to get paid $1 a year salary to be in charge of housing, right? And then for each unit that you help create, you'll get paid so much up to a maximum cap of a salary. If we incentivize people, then we'd have no problems. That's what the problem is here. And the other thing is the populace is growing very tax weary. They can't be taxed anymore. You know?
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And we've got some significant misunderstandings here. We're in an information technology age. Over the next 20 years, the economy is going to change more in the next 20 years
It's changing right
than
now.
it has in the last 2,000.
Yeah.
That's compounded with the market competition of globalization. So when you've got people that are paying approximately 43% of their income in taxes, and 95% of those taxes are either going to interest, or they're misappropriated, or at least underutilized,
Or some-
you've got a significant problem. Moreover, the people that tend to suffer the worst because of taxation or inefficient taxation are women and children. So what we've done with our economy is we've caused a war against women and children.
With their nurture and the future of
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I use the word disinvestment. It's probably not a proper word, but what we're doing is we're running our economy on the backs of women and children. When you get out in Ward 8, such as I have in 2010, I entered the race late, but nevertheless, I was in almost every single apartment building in 2010 and campaigning and reading Professor Halchansky's Three Cities or the United Way's Poverty via Postal Code didn't prepare me for what I saw.
Of course.
It's just ridiculous.
I have seen that too.
Another example of misdirected resources, you go through the parks in Ward 8 and you look at the swing sets and the stuff that they have, and compare that into the other areas that StatsCan tells us have higher income levels, there's no comparison.
So
The
there is
stuff
a
we
huge
it's
disparity.
huge. There's a huge
It's
disparity.
100%. It's who you
And,
it's who you
do you
know.
It also
Sorry.
one last point.
Yeah.
One last point. It also shows up in the school system. Look, I make a habit of having some friends that are in the school system, teachers, and they tell me what it's like. Comparatively speaking, I know other people that teach in different areas. Oh, there's a disparity from income postal code to income postal code.
I want to add one more thing to what he said because he mentioned swing sets.
Yeah.
Water fountains. In the city, when I was a kid, you'd ride your bicycle around. I stopped riding it because I found out you get impotent from riding the bike. It pushes on your perineal nerve. But in any event, when I used to ride a bicycle when I was younger, there'd be water fountains everywhere. You notice they're all gone. And they did it in stealth. Where was the last place you saw a public water fountain?
That's a good point.
Okay, they're all gone. And
I saw
you want
one on the Bathurst and
okay,
Yukon.
but there used to be
That's all, one.
almost every park or parkette had one. This is how the corporations, they say fascism is the merger of government and corporations. This is how the corporations have bought government. They want to sell water in bottles. And what they do is they say, get rid of all the water fountains. Now, who does that screw? The poor, not the rich. Because a mother with 4 kids would normally go to the water fountain and hydrate her children. Well, what happens? She has to go buy bottled water. If she can't afford the bottled water, what happens? The kids get dehydrated. They wind up at the doctors. So society is paying a price for the lack of water fountains. Now, one more thing. One of my campaign pledges is to get fluoride out of the water. We spend $1.9 million a year putting fluoride in the water. Fluoride is a byproduct of the aluminum industry. It's a waste product, and it's a scam. And Harvard just released a study that the IQ of children drops by 7 IQ points if they're in a fluoridated environment. It causes thyroid disease, manic depression, a whole bunch of other diseases. Fluoride has got to be removed from our water. We'll save $1.9 million a year. And then water will be safe to drink. Then we've got to get those water fountains turned back on. The infrastructure's still there. You just got to turn the fountains back on.
You know, another great point about fluoride.
Go for it.
They've also found that fluoride inhibits the development of the frontal cortex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that's where your hyper conscientiousness comes from.
Yeah, so it's almost like the government's trying to dumb us down. And let's talk about
it myself.
But at least you got good hair. Also the lead in the water. I live in Beaches, Ward 32. A lot of the houses have lead in the water, but they don't talk about it. They buried it. Nobody wants to take ethical responsibility for the lead in the water. And what I want to do if I get elected, and I hope I do, is I want to challenge the government and say, get that lead out of the water. And if they won't do it, we'll start a class action lawsuit. Because I can list off all these medical conditions caused by lead poisoning. I guarantee you a lot of families have those conditions and don't realize it's lead in the water. I put my water through a massive system. I have 2 alumina filters to remove the fluoride and 2 carbon filters to remove everything else. And people flushing birth control pills down the toilet, that winds up in our water supply. All of that, it's disgusting, you know.
A small note on that. I heard that the city of Toronto put a new project for 300 or 200 something houses, a pilot project to help them to replace the pipe for that increase. But
pilot, see, this is what I don't understand. Pilot project. Pilot project means they're testing out the project to see if it's worth it. You're poisoning the population. There shouldn't be a pilot project.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is that is slow.
These guys are commies. They should have a 5-year plan to remove the water.
City is going. As Arthur said earlier, that there is no organization that they just put it in place. Okay, these are the problems. These are the plans.
And they have
It
committees.
takes-
They have
it-
committees.
Oh yes,
Forever. You know about that.
On last show,
Well-
we discussed a lot about the committees after the committees after the committees. Let me just go a little bit, not change the subject, but just a little bit go a little bit side of the issue of the City of Toronto and the existing councillors. I asked from my previous guests in the last show. When I meet people like yourself or you, I noticed that there are a lot of bright-minded people who are compassionate to help to the city and themselves, of course, their family. And yet when it comes down to the voters usually either don't show up, or if they show, they just go for incumbent.
Okay.
What is it, and what can you do about it?
Why don't I don't care.
doesn't
You
matter.
want- you-
Which one?
Well, I'll just, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well-
We're both too polite.
Well, firstly, there's going to be a segment of the population that think that they're protesting by not voting,
Which wrong? It's wrong.
which is absolutely
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's almost like they don't have the time to phone up the candidate and ask them what's going on. Well, I don't know. I'm sure James and any other candidate I've known has always been available probably from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. to take phone calls. I certainly am. That's one segment of the population. Another segment of the population is if you get people that are working in spite of the early polls and in spite of the extended hours, believe it or not, you spend 4 hours a day on the bus and 8 or 12 hours at a job, you're pooched at the end of the day. And sometimes, and we underestimate this, there's a significant portion of the population that just doesn't have the resources to make it.
To educate himself or herself.
Well, or to the vote, to the poll.
To the poll.
No, they
Well,
don't.
my
Now, I know in provincial and federal law, the employer is supposed to give them the time
Yes.
off. Okay? Well, that's a great theory.
but they don't show
Ask-
up neither.
Ask for the time off
They'll intimidate.
when you're struggling to get every hour you can, and you need to get every hour you can out of your employer. We're not all on salary,
No, of course not.
so that's a problem.
But in the federal and provincial, even in the last recent election provincial, 49.5. They didn't show up.
The other problem that you have, and this is very significant, this is probably 50% of the people that don't vote have this attitude, and they just have zero confidence
Of who
in the
who-
process. So they won't take the 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it is to go to the poll and back.
Yeah, they think their vote doesn't count,
Yeah.
and that's the bigger problem. And the other problem is the mainstream media suppresses the idea of anyone who doesn't toe the Marxist line. If say, for example, a candidate holds an event on Earth Day, it'll be reported. But if somebody holds an event related to fiscal responsibility, the media is not going to report it.
It's boring.
It's extremely boring, and it's also against the raison d'etre of the Marxist infrastructure. What we need to do is, and what I've tried to do with my website, my election website, is make it interesting, funny, entertaining, because people have a short attention span nowadays. And I put funny animations on there.
Well, I saw that.
I have an animation of my opponent being spanked, and voters can go on there and spank Mary on the website.
Yeah.
And you know what? People
He
said,
cost a lot.
yeah, but people said to me, well, why are you doing that? And I'm going to tell you, I'm
I
getting.
would ask you to.
Right. I've done very little advertising so far, and I'm getting 200 to 300 unique visitors a day going to my website at jamessearsward32.com, which is amazing. And people are energized. I'm getting lots of emails saying, oh my God, buddy, you got balls doing that, whatever. And people are excited. Now, the key is taking that excitement and translating it to the vote.
Yeah, of course.
But the first step is to get people excited. Because, Gandhi was attributed, there was a famous quote attributed to Gandhi saying, but actually it's really a trade unionist used the quote, and Gandhi was misattributed. It was first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they attack you, then you win. So
It's like advertising.
exactly. So first they ignore you, right?
Yeah.
So I've overcome that. I'm not being ignored. I'm being mocked now,
Oh,
right?
okay, so
I'm at step 2.
Okay.
But once they realize there's substance behind it, then the attack will start, and that's when you step up your campaign. And then when they see you being attacked, they're like, human beings have an automatic protective response, where if they see another human getting attacked, they want to help them, especially if they're the underdog. So I'm waiting for the attack to come.
So you're counting on that. You must have a thick skin to go through the process.
Well, for sure, you have to have a thing. This is why
Oh, yeah.
men. This is why men are best. And this is going to sound sexist because it is, but men are best at being in politics. I'm going to tell you why. Women take things very personally. If a woman loses a vote, she takes it to heart. Men don't. Also, politics is a very dirty field. A man can go into battle, slit throats, do horrible things in war, come home, hug his children and dog. If a woman has to do that, any femininity within her is destroyed. And I find that women that enter politics lose their soul. The Hillary Clintons of the world, even Mary-Margaret McMahon, before and after the election. No, but it's true. Before and after the election, you look into her eyes, she's glassed over. Like she's lost something within her because she compromised herself. That part of her that is feminine. And if a woman doesn't compromise that, she can't function. Now, our premier can function because, and again, I don't mean this in an offensive way, because she's a lesbian, it's a different female constitution. So she can, but it's true, right? And she can function on a male level and do the dirty things men do, just like her predecessor, and get away with it, and go home at night and sleep comfortably.
You remind me of the history, the 100-Year War between the England and the French.
I've heard of it.
That so many women in the process lost their faith to the God and humanity because of the number of the,
but it's true.
Because you said slitting here.
Yeah, but you know what it is? We live in a society here where we have to be politically correct all the time. And you know what political correctness is? It's mind control. If you're told what to think, because you know the word tolerance, they changed the definition. The word tolerance, to tolerate meant to put up with something unpleasant. So when you're tolerant, you're putting up with something unpleasant. Now,
I always say political correctness is moral bankruptcy.
It is for sure. That's a beautiful way of putting it.
It is.
Can you elaborate on that one? That phrase.
Well, you're projecting the image that other people would like you to be.
And who are the other people?
The voter.
Yeah.
You have to ascribe to, what you think the constituents are going to want, and a lot of people have perfected the science of projecting this political corruptness. I said corruptness accidentally.
That's okay.
Correctness. Well,
that's a Freudian slip, right?
But I said corruptness. And the people that are getting elected, 90% of them have perfected the science of projecting an ambiguous image.
Well, you know what? John Tory is one.
The politics is a perception.
You know, John Tory.
That's right.
John Tory is so ambiguous because what they do is you know what they call themselves? I bring people together. I bring left and right together.
John Tory says that?
Well, that's what he says. He says he's a centrist. He brings everyone together. He's like very flaky, doesn't really commit to this or that. Obama was the same way. He goes, I bring people together, and then that means he has no principles. He stands for nothing. When you're a guy who brings everyone together, it means you're neutral. You're like a neutral substance that attracts people. You don't want a leader like that.
But if he could, why
if
the Progressive Party?
What you're saying in a macrocosmic perspective,
right.
I entirely agree with. But on a more personal level, when it comes to the quantum of the deal, the currency in the deal, the value in the deal, The people that can find the best mutual interest for both parties, those are the ones that are worth their weight in gold.
If they can find the mutual interest.
But it's not that hard if you dedicate yourself to it and you study it, because it's a science like anything else.
Yeah, but there's parasites on the far left. There's parasites on the far right.
Well, it's the same as statistics. You always throw the highest number and the bottom number out.
Right.
Extremism isn't going to get you anywhere in anything, whether it's extreme left or extreme right or whatever paradigm you care to call it.
But we need.
Well, that has to be mitigated out of the scenario.
But we need issue by issue extremism. See, I'm not extreme left or right. I'm an issue by issue extremist. I'm extreme left on certain issues, extreme right, and that's what we need. We don't need a person who's at the. John Tory's in the center of every issue. Nobody can be. That's a person that sold himself out.
Game of vote, grabbing vote.
But this isn't the game. See, this is the problem. This is why people are disillusioned. Because people play these vote games to get votes. You're a straight talker. I'm a straight talker. And you know what? I'm going to talk, and there's going to be certain people there that are going to be really offended at one thing I say. They're going to say, "Oh my God, that James Sears guy. I'm a school teacher, and he mentioned school teachers. I'm not voting for him." But I could agree with them on 9 out of 10 issues.
Exactly.
But because they've got this attitude,
they've already acquired a predisposition, which is a form of discrimination.
That's right. And you know what?
Predispositions are a form of discrimination.
You know what? I should try that.
Correctness does that to you. Because to the society, I mean, not to you personally.
Well, yeah, but the political correctness always works one way. We've had females running in charge of Ward 32, my ward, for decades. Now, I think it's time for a man. But you can't say that. I can't say that they're sexist against me, because the Marxism only works in one direction.
And how
right?
Ward 32 progressed in the last 10 years or so that it was run?
Well, I've been living in the ward for 11 years, and I just don't like the amount of development. It was a nice, quiet area. I'll tell you the stupidity of it. We have, the beachfront there, and then we have the Kew Gardens, the park, and then the businesses on Queen Street are hurting, right? So someone came up with a great idea. Mary-Margaret supports this. They paid some consultant to come up with this idea. They're going to build pathways so that people from the beach can go up through the park and direct them to Queen Street. They'll shop. Now, who goes to the beach? Well, I'm from a poor Greek family. We changed our name to Sears in the 70s because my father saw it in the back of a truck. It's a true story.
Political correctness.
Political correctness, that's right. So what happened was, we used to go to parks because it was free and we'd have barbecue. So who's at the park? Who's down at the beachfront? All poor families or, gangsta guys and their bitches are down there. And they're all down there hanging out because it's free. You want to build a path so all these people who of limited resources can walk down this path all the way up to Queen Street, and you think they're going to shop at the high-end shops on Queen Street. It's the stupidity of it. And you know what? The naivety of it. And the voters eat it up.
Well,
they buy it. They don't think, it's because of the fluoride. The IQ's low. I blame the fluoride.
How is the Ward 8 going in the matter of development and this kind of thing?
Well,
let me rephrase my question. In the last 10 years in Ward 8,
well, we actually have a lot of vacant land in Ward 8.
But if people are better
what are the boundaries, just for my familiarity?
Well, the boundaries, the northerly boundary is Steeles. Mm-hmm. The westerly boundary is the 400 from Steeles down to Finch. Easterly across Finch down Jane Street to Grand Ravine, and then Grand Ravine over to Keele. Southerly on Keele to Shepherd, and over to Dufferin North. So it's a very interesting ward because we actually do have quite a lot of business in it. The whole section between Jane and Dufferin and Shepherd north to Steeles is business, and we have another strip of business over on the westerly boundary. But we have two of the poorest postal codes in Canada.
He has the Jane Finch corridor.
Jane and Finch. One of the examples that I like to do is the Hallmark Center at Shepherd and Yonge, which is a large business condo. I feel that that area has grown because of the subway, even if it's
Still the
taken
trends
10 or
are
20.
part of it.
Oh, like,
All the time.
it's just amazing, the buildings that are going up.
It used to
But
be
we have a
plaza.
20-acre parcel. I'm fairly certain that it's Tridel that owns it, the same developers as the Hallmark Center. And if we could get a subway system, we would revolutionize the economy, completely change the economy at Jane and Finch. But moreover,
You mean if subway go to
the
east,
Finch line,
to
east-west, yeah.
Yeah.
The hospital, which is to the south, is outside of the Ward 8 boundary, but it's got a lot of vacant land. We have York University, which has a lot of vacant land.
But how about people? Are they better off than 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Absolutely not. From following the census tracts from, I think, 2007, census tracts are the same as postal codes. The poverty level has gone down. We have probably the highest unemployment
You mean
rate
poverty level
in
went
Canada.
up? You mean the level of income went down, but the
Level of
poverty-
income went down, and
poverty
the
went
poverty
up.
level went up.
There's also
yeah. But
hyperinflation. I mean, it
we have
hasn't-
hyperinflation, but what a lot of people grossly underestimate is the shrinking middle class. By 2025, based on StatsCan models, accepted models, 53% of Torontonians will be under the low-income cutoff. That is significant, and we can stop it. We can improve that by keeping taxes low and improving transportation systems. And when I say improving transportation systems, I've yet to see any financial models that tell me that development is derived from LRTs and streetcar systems. My experience is quite the opposite, from having been a milkman on St. Clair in the late 80s and having gone down there several times. In fact, we just did a movie shoot there a little while ago. And it's just the whole subway, the whole streetcar system that they have there is problematic.
Oh, I used to have an office on St. Clair, and when they started to do that, most of businesses, not most of, but a large number of them closed.
Well, I'm very big on social cohesion. I like to see strong communities built, and there's 9 million little tiny factors that are always thrown at us that undermine our social cohesion. It's a huge systemic problem, and this is a perfect example of it. St. Clair is a perfect example of it. The meat markets, the grocery stores, the produce stores, all those stores I used to deliver to with my milk, they're gone. So when you used to go to the family store and you knew the mother and the father and the brother and the son, and your kids met them and everything else, you know what? They're gone. Moreover, an attorney I know has an office there, and I said, you know, tell me, what was it like? Without a word of a lie, he told me. He said, now I know what it's like to be bombed. That fiasco went on for 2 years.
Wow.
It stopped and started, I think, twice.
Oh, no, I was there.
The budget came in at almost 2 or 3 times higher than it was supposed to.
The first time they canceled, they paid some sort of the punishment fee, and then they got it back again, and then they started over.
And then, when it was all finished and completed, and the new cars came, the new cars weren't compatible with the curbing. So in essence, the curbing had to be all hammered out and poured again.
where's see, this is what I mean. Who okay, but somebody's head should roll for that.
Well, maybe
See,
it's
there's
that
no
coloring.
accountability.
Maybe that is coloring.
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. This is the problem with government, okay? And it's a culture that rolls down to the municipal level. I could use a less polite term to describe it.
You're open.
Yeah, you probably know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But the MPPs and MPs are not exposed to any kind of litigation. You can't sue them. They've made oaths to the Queen. and they can't be held responsible criminally or civilly for what they do.
Even if you can do that, well, you have to understand that for the present government, the majority liberal we have just elected, if you get all of their votes that counted, is equal by 14% of eligible voters in Ontario, and they have majority government.
Well, I'm well aware of that argument, and I think there's some credibility to it, but we can't change the system, we can't change the rules. It's very difficult. The point I'm trying to make is that same culture drips down to the municipal level. There's no specific deterrent. So study the science of deterrence, the psychology of deterrence, and you'll find it in law books. And if there's no deterrence, it's only human nature.
Yeah,
You're going to do whatever you can.
I saw some.
That's what I call the utilitarian culture, which is in the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives. But we also see that utilitarian type mentality dripping down to the voter. It's in unions. They want to extract as much as they can out of the economy. They're concerned about short-term gain and forget about the next generation.
Or even the same generation.
It's a macrocosmic problem.
I saw something in the news today where it said the city of Toronto was saying we do not have an issue with spending. We have an issue with income generation.
Income generation.
It makes no sense because with revenues, we have a revenue stream problem.
For city or for public?
For the city. For the city. And I saw that and I thought, what the hell is this? Because if you have a household where not enough revenues coming in, you cut your spending. They don't do that. If every person on the Sunshine List took $10,000 a year less, people making over $100,000 took $10,000 a year less, we could slash property taxes 2% overnight. Nobody's talking about that. Gay Pride Parade, $140,000 a year we give them. And was it $2 million this year for World Pride? Why? If every homosexual man in the city, or say 25,000 had one less martini each, they could put the money in. Over $500,000 a Caravana. Why? Greek, Italian, all of it. Why are we giving any special interest group money? Let them raise it themselves.
Yeah, like when you get out into the apartments in my ward and you see single women raising kids and they're spending 75 to 90% of their income on rent. Okay? They'd be happy with one can of beans a day. That's what, 90 cents or $1? So we're talking about significantly changing the lifestyle of a poor single mom with $25 a month.
But we've also got to educate the poor single mom that when property taxes are high, her rent is high. A lot of people don't understand that rent is geared to property tax. If we give a landlord a property tax decrease, he passes it on to the person that's renting. And that's why
we've got to make it more interesting for developers to build these rental properties, and property tax is one of the ways to do it.
Well, the other thing too is I had another program where churches. Now look, I'm a Christian, but churches should be paying some property tax, maybe not 100%. I'm suggesting a 10% shadow tax at the churches. So in other words, if you have a big church on a big plot of land and you should be paying 20 grand a year, you pay 2 grand a year, just a 10% shadow tax. And it doesn't cost us anything to collect it because we already have an infrastructure in place to collect property tax. And then we take that money, we pull it together, and we distribute it to elderly people who are living under the poverty line. I was going to call it a dignity dividend. I don't want to call it charity. It's a dignity dividend, and we could do it very easily.
You're very good with words, too. And so you are.
Yeah, but see, this is part of the reason why we can energize. I've seen them energize people talking to them in a room.
I'm already
because you have to speak eloquently and intelligently to get, sort of to capture the imagination of people. Most politicians are unable to do that. But I really think
Or unwilling.
No, a lot of them are unable, okay? Because not everybody's born with, in the old days, certain people were told, you're a born leader. But that was a small percentage of people. Nowadays, here's the problem. It's the Marxist education. You're all the same. Even if little Billy gets a lower score, they give him the same grade. They say, nobody's a failure, Billy. You're all winners. Or like they play soccer, and then it says there's no losers. There's no so
You've got to equalize it.
You equalize everyone. So then people like Mary-Margaret McMahon think she's a born leader, and she goes out there and runs. Whereas the real leaders, myself and Mr. Smitherman, are so disgusted by the system, we would normally be discouraged to enter the system, but we have the courage now to move forward, and so do you. Are you going to run again, by the way?
No, I never ran in the city. I always
No, I'm saying provincially.
Oh yeah, of course, provincial. I have a political party.
Well, and which party is that?
Canadians' Choice Party.
Is that a libertarian-style party?
No, it is left, right, center, doesn't matter. As long as you represent your constituents.
I love it.
The core principle of the party is, as long as you represent your constituents, there is no policy dictation from the leadership of the party. Unlike the three main...
So it's organized anarchy.
Yes, you mentioned something you said about when a single mother with a couple of children paying 90%, 80% rent, and just they are lucky to get a can of. And then earlier you mentioned about the culture of the not being able to have a lawsuit against MPPs or MPs.
Right.
I want to connect this to, I remember years back when Mr. Sabucci came and said, oh, you can
David Sabucci.
you can have a can of the dented tuna for 79 cents or 69 cents, then whatever. He was suggesting people do that, but at the same time, he was receiving, God knows, $150,000 salary. Mm-hmm. So it's easy for people who are sitting, or those 8,000 people you are referring to, sitting in their private club, to dictate how the other people to live.
Absolutely.
I'm not suggesting to have a socialism here. What I'm suggesting is a little bit of the fairness.
Yeah, but what he did wrong, he was correct. Tuna is cheap, and the problem is a lot of poor people are not educated enough to understand proper nutrition. Okay? And what Sabucci should have done is he should have said that and said, look, we need to put together a program to educate people about how to feed their children in a nutritious, inexpensive manner. Then it would have been okay, but he just, you know what it was? It was a let them eat cake comment.
Oh, yes.
Right? It was his Marie Antoinette moment. And it just destroyed him. And he just looks like an arrogant fucker when he did it. And that was what the problem was.
Well, I don't mean to be overly critical, but, having been in the ward and seeing the checks come out at the beginning of the month and standing out in front of these grocery stores campaigning and looking at the groceries that come out, there's no beating around the bush. I'm not going to mince words. Many of these women need to be under supervision. Plainly, a significant portion of them are incompetent, and they're not getting the support they need. The support they need is from other female leaders. It's from the public health nurse, who I think in Toronto doesn't play a big enough role in the school system.
But yet they spend a lot of money for allocate for education, but they don't do the good job.
They can pack them in an auditorium or in the don't most.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt, James, but you've struck a real vein with me, because I really feel the school system is underutilized. No way are we getting anywhere near 20% return on our investment from the school system. We've got these schools that are sitting there 2 to 4 months a year vacant, for one. They don't open them till 8 a.m. They shut them down at 4. And if you try and get in and out of them and you're not, a student or a guardian, you're basically a criminal. You're trespassing. We've got community centers across the street that are worth millions of dollars, and no disrespect to the community centers, but in essence, you've got the same resources on one side of the street as you do on the other. We've got duplicity. The point I'm making here is why are the schools just restricted to certain age groups? Why don't adults that need education have access to the resources as well?
100%.
So when you've got taxpayers in the neighborhood and you've got all these poor moms who are not getting any support, they don't have internet access, they can't learn how to do Excel or Word or do internet marketing or any of those kinds of searches. We got people in our area kind of like we take internet for granted. Don't take it for granted in Ward 8 because most of them don't have it.
But we should have seminars for these women to go to. The schools can, he's right, you open up
Absolutely.
the school and say, look, if you want to collect welfare, social assistance, you have to once a month go to a seminar, and it could be 1,000 people in the room, it doesn't matter, and with a public health nurse or someone like this, or a nutritionist, dietitian, explaining to them how to properly buy things, how to feel, even how to calculate prices. These poor women get ripped off. They buy stuff in small quantities, and they don't understand. Sometimes they don't have the money to buy larger quantities. Sometimes they just don't get it. And
I am pretty sure you don't have to even make it compulsory. I'm pretty sure if, as you said, if the school are open till 9 o'clock at night, and after 5 or 6 o'clock, they have different classes. I am pretty sure people volunteer.
We've got two community centers in Ward 8 and one on the southern boundary of it. And I've been in all of these community centers, and they're very well utilized. In fact, a lot of groups aren't getting the permits that they're asking for.
So city is a little bit of obstacle?
Well, it's not the fact is they're booked out.
Oh, they
So we've got essentially 3 community centers in Ward 8 for a population of about, well, it says 30,000, but I'd really like to see, I really think it's more about 22,000. And we have York University, which makes the population fluctuate because a lot of them don't register and they don't fall, they don't get, they're not subject to census, so it's hard to tell. But the 30,000 people and 3 community centers overbooked. Some of these groups that, you know, if they had the resources, you know, a place to set up, you know, a female leadership group, like some lady who's a successful businesswoman, maybe a sales agent, a real estate agent, an attorney, whatever, to come in and you know, female leadership is a real problem. Okay, we need to help females access other peer-to-peer type groups. And this is one of the great problems you see in Ward 8. Some of these women are so far off the map from reality in terms of their organization skills and so on and so forth. But this is what I'm saying, where the schools are underutilized. We need to open them up and repurpose them.
So if you have a location available to them, if we have a city that's a little bit more compassionate to pay attention to the needs of the education aspect of the society for basic education. We are not talking about law degree. We are talking about how to purchase your grocery, how to take care of
it used to be called home ec, but home ec now is no longer home ec.
Or at least how to deal with the hygiene of your
everything
and everything, which is very easy, can be done by even volunteers. Just come and give a lecture once a week.
And you know what? And it pays for itself.
Of course.
Because in the improved health of the populace.
And reduce the amount of the healthcare.
You got it.
It helps respect for taxpayers.
But you know why it won't happen?
Getting a better return on investment.
The reason it won't happen is because the Marxists don't give a fuck about these poor people because they tend not to vote. They know.
They don't have voices.
They don't have voices. and we need to speak for
doesn't
these
have voices?
the poor.
The poor
And
don't
we-
have
The poor
voices.
doesn't
Yeah,
have voice.
we
Oh,
need to speak for them, and that's why I'm saying I have a lot of respect for Mr. Smitherman. He's one of the few people in the city that speaks for the poor, and we need to start speaking for these people. It doesn't cost us any extra. It doesn't cost us as a society any extra. It's costing us money not to give the poor voices and not to lift them up from poverty. It's actually costing us money, and it's not a socialist or communist
Oh,
ideology.
no, I understand that. I understand.
Yeah.
The reason I brought that up earlier, because both federally and provincially, when I was running, I wrote articles as a press release, and I brought this issue in the logical way. That if you reduce the poverty, if you increase a little bit of the education of the public who don't have access to that, by that you reduce the crime rate, you reduce the health issue, all of that comes back as a tax saving.
Now you're talking about social cohesion.
So,
You're
but
building
when I
social
said
cohesion.
That, they told me you're lefty, you're this, you're
No.
that. I said it is common sense.
No. What you have to do is what I do. I'm a libertarian, but I'm a Christian libertarian. And if you actually Google Christian libertarian, there is something called Christian libertarianism, which allows you to have social programs but be a libertarian at the same time.
I understand
And the thing
that.
is, and that's when you could say I'm both.
Yeah.
Because
Well, there's an easy way to determine a social program, a good or bad. Okay, it's either a hand up or a hand up,
Yeah.
and that's how you determine a good
Beautiful.
social program. Very simple economics. When you put money into, or when you put resources, not necessarily money.
Yes,
When you open resources up, when you open resources up to something that creates social cohesion, okay, there's a definite payback to the community because it creates the specific deterrent. Everybody's sticking together. If you go too far off one way or another, you're basically ostracized.
so you're saying a hand up instead of a hand out?
Hand up rather than a handout.
Was it what the Nazi said? Hand up instead of hand out?
You say, anyone can translate anything you say anyway or any shape you want.
I'll have to
I'm
watch
sorry.
that spin.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
We are getting very close. We have only, I guess, 6 or 7 minutes left in our program. I want to just have a touch on the segue because both of you mentioned about the issue of the transit, and you were talking about the Finch line, and you were talking about the issue of the fares and all of that. I mentioned that in my previous program, and I asked all my guests as well, 30 years ago, or approximately 30 years ago, when I arrived to Toronto for the first time as a landed immigrant, the issue of the TTC was on the table. 30 years later, God knows how many millions or $1 billion they spent on the research and the inquiry. The only difference that I have seen, besides the reduction of the service, poor customer service, delays, is only fuel Shepherd line from the Young, from the Shepherd to the Fairview Mall. That is the only thing that I have seen in 30 years. My question is, it's very simple. I asked both of you to give answer for the last answer of the show. If not, actually I hope you will. When you get elected, how are you going to deal with another 40 or 42 people who are constantly, based on my experience, delayed this process for years after years after years? Because you can't be just have the only voice and get your plans ahead. I start with Arthur.
Well,
How do you
I
deal
think.
with the other people in the city?
Well, firstly, you have to show the mathematics of it, the logic of it, and that's not the whole. You're not going to sell the deal just on pure economics. You've got to drill down to these people and show them in their heart how this is going to benefit their constituents, not necessarily the constituents right in their own ward, but the whole betterment of the city of Toronto, the whole economy of Toronto. Because you got to remember, even though we're sitting here in the middle of North America, okay, we're in a global economy now. like it or not, and people are in denial about that. We are competing globally now. We've got to get people to work in 20 minutes, not 2 hours, because they can make a better input into their job. So you've got to drill down to the economics, but you've also got to drill down to all the various levels of emotion and get them to understand that way.
Do you see that ability in yourself?
Well, I do, absolutely. I absolutely I do. I've got the dispute resolution training. I've read about 20 books on negotiation, and it's a science, and it's really not that hard to figure out. But it does revolve around mutual interests. One of the great misunderstandings we have, and this is the cause of 70% of our misunderstandings, conflict is a byproduct of misunderstandings. And the left paradigm tends to use a different vocabulary than the right. But when you drill down, you're using different vocabulary to say the same thing. Yeah. And you've got to get people to realize that on their own. And it's completely doable.
Okay, his method may work, but for me, this is going to sound very bad, but I'm going to say it.
It's your method.
Leftists and Marxists only respond to the point of a gun or a fist in their face. Now, we can't do that.
Okay, that is why we have Magna Carta.
The next best thing is intimidation and embarrassment. We need to publicly embarrass them, and it's the good, and we need to intimidate them with protest. A politician nowadays has to be a media whore. You have to get out to the media. You have to have events. You have to have press conferences out in the middle of landfills. And this is the only thing that's going to work, because these Marxists have to be embarrassed into doing the right thing. The dispute resolution may work. It may not. But I know that if a Marxist is embarrassed, like if the community embarrasses them, and if they're intimidated by protesters showing up outside their house, like they've been doing to Rob Ford. This is what they do to Rob Ford, the Marxists.
In the court of public.
Right.
In the court of public.
If the court of public opinion, if public opinion is reversed, and there's protesters outside of these Marxist homes telling them, "What the hell are you doing? There's bed bugs in our apartment," then they'll do something. If they're afraid to walk out of the house, heaven forbid, they're going to bump into 20 or 30 angry protesters.
A specific deterrent.
Exactly. Then they'll do it. So gun or fist or intimidation, which is legal, as within reason. That it can become criminal harassment at some point. And then for sure, public embarrassment.
I call it social engineering.
But not Marxist social engineering.
What we do is we bring them into court, because they might not sit down to mediation until they're faced with a lawsuit.
Well, yeah, exactly.
That's social engineering.
That's right, exactly.
I'm just using a different, more polite term.
I like that. I love
Probably
that.
we need a little bit of both or combination of both.
I think so.
We are reaching to the end of the program. I'm getting the signal from our producer. First of all, thank you for both of you.
That was great.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Not only being here, but also being candid. In this show, we want people to see the real face of their candidates.
I think it's sad that you have to thank people for being candid.
No,
you know what I mean?
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the socially correctness society that we live in.
Exactly.
I have to say that. And in this time and in this age, I call it a combination of the courage and dedication. Thank you for both of you to be here, and thank you for you viewers that stuck with us. I hope you enjoyed the discussion tonight, and please don't forget, participate, vote, volunteer, and become even a candidate. Thank you and good night.